Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I am the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner on this Wednesday, June 21st. The PUL season is all wrapped up, and your champion, Keith, it's not the DC Shadow. It's not the New York Red Rock. No. The Raleigh Radiance take it down with 18-16 wins over DC in semis and New York in the final. They rope-a-doped us, Keith.
They really did, right? I don't know if this was their plan all along. Like, I think that their motivation might have been purely to humiliate us. They started out the season and they're like, what would make Charlie and Keith look the dumbest possible? And this was it. Do you think they have a shot at winning?
No.
Okay. They're kind of the only team that I don't think I can see winning two of these games back to back. Either that or after what happened with the Surge, they were like, well, what's the most vindicating possible outcome for the Surge? Two teams that Philly beat in the finals playing each other. Because Surge folks have already declared themselves champions. Never mind that loss to DC.
Understandably so. Yeah, wow, what a performance from Raleigh. And to go into DC's home stadium packed with DC fans and knock them off, very impressive. And Keith, I mean, we did talk about this. We both expressed skepticism that Raleigh was going to be able to win consecutive games at this tournament, that they were going to be able to show up in the way, to beat the high quality competition that they would have to go up against. But we talked about the fact that they would be integrating these UNC pieces, and that was a big deal. Alex Barnett, Dawn Colton, Grace Connerly. Let's go down the list. I mean, how many players, Teresa Yu. There are certainly players that were not a part of that Pleiades team that also contributed quite a bit. No doubt about that. But at the end of the day, I was very impressed with what we saw. Erica Birdsong, didn't say her name yet. Those players were massive for them throughout the weekend. And I think truly made the difference.
Their depth played extremely well. They had big plays from Caitlin Gross, from Clara Bidiger-Kurst, like players that you're not really hearing get talked about a lot. And at points, Alex Barnett was like the best player there. Claire Revere, Gina Titcomb both also played really well. I mean, it was a real top to bottom story of success for them. Some players stepped up in the semifinal and others stepped up in the final. I don't know if it was the UNC players returning, if there was a switch that was flipped, if they were just holding, keeping their cards close to their chest because they knew that they were basically a lock to advance out of their division or whatnot. And only the divisional record mattered. Maybe they knew that the whole time. Maybe they knew that only their divisional record mattered. And it wouldn't really matter what seed they were by the time they got to nationals. It just felt like a totally different level of focus and execution from what we saw in the regular season from the Radiance to the postseason, where they just rarely did their games really even feel in doubt. Once they got up a couple of breaks, and there were points where game would draw back to even or team would get within one goal of them, but they just never really seemed like they were out of control or lost poise during that entire 2-game run.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the final, Keith, and it was 2-1 New York after 3 holds, and then it was 7-2 Raleigh. They went on a 5-break run, and again, basically the game was over. I don't think that New York ever cut it closer than 2 goals the rest of the way. They started to kind of claw back. They got it to 9-7, but then they gave up another break, and then they gave up another 3-break run. And then it made it 16-9, and see you later. And it's not like New York didn't play terribly. I just don't think that they were able to match the execution and the depth of Raleigh. They relied a lot on a couple of key players and just didn't play their best offensive game at the wrong time.
Timing is everything, right? It was pretty stunning where we were. I mean, we were at Utah High School National Invite, and we turn around and it's like, oh, well, New York thumped Minnesota. That was a little surprising. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Raleigh's also beating DC. It's over. And then we're on the plane. Raleigh's beating New York. New York's making a comeback. Oh no, can't finish it off. Just playing your best is, I wonder how much of this is influenced by UNC, who has kind of this championship pedigree. That I wonder how much of that experience winning is helping this team perform at a level that we didn't anticipate them playing.
Well, I mean, I think it's clearly impactful. To what extent is not totally clear. And like you said, they got great performances from some of the players that you don't necessarily talk about as much. I thought Claire Revere was fantastic. But I think the integration of those UNC players is really the thing that made the difference from, a close-ish, weird, shortened loss to DC earlier in the year. And otherwise, they did send some weak rosters to games that they basically, I think, knew they were going to win. They didn't have to send their best team to Nashville. And so when it came time to show up with the heavy hitters, they did so. And they forced a lot of turnovers. I mean, their D-line got the disc away from the New York offense 23 times. You, as the gridlock, there's nothing you can do. Like, you have to play cleaner than that if you want to beat a good team. And they just didn't come close. And I think a lot of it comes down to that early run. You have to stabilize sooner than that. You cannot give up a 6-0 run and expect to win a game. And they played decently even after that point, but it was just too late.
Yeah, and in general, Raleigh, I thought, did a nice job with their D-line offense, or in cases where they ended up subbing. I thought they did a great job playing two-way, and teams were, I feel like, struggling to capitalize on opportunities to break. It wasn't like Raleigh's offense was perfect, but teams just were not able to be efficient when their D-lines got the disc. And that made a big difference to me. And I think, when I was watching the games, it feels cliche to say this, but it felt like Raleigh was winning the reset game a lot. Teams were just not able to really prevent them from resetting the disc at will, and they were able to apply a lot of pressure to teams in the reset space. It felt like Raleigh was much stronger in that area, and that particularly played out well with these what felt these late game situations where they were holding the advantage and they could kind of just burn the clock. Teams couldn't stop them from throwing the disc backwards. And in the cases that teams could, they were good at looking upfield and then finding a quick break for a short gainer that reset the clock if teams overcommitted to trying to stop a backwards throw. Raleigh's execution in that area, to me, was a major difference maker.
Oh, Keith, re-rank the teams following championship weekend.
By my rankings or by the committee's rankings?
Don't try to guess. Don't try to get in the mind of the committee.
Oh, committee,
Impossible.
I'm going Shadow, Radiance, Strike, Gridlock, Soul, Mechanics, Surge, I think.
How about your personal ones?
I mean, I guess I'm going. Where do you put the Surge? I think I still got.
No. You don't give me the full power rankings. Just rank the 4 teams.
I'm not including the Surge. I thought you wanted all 5 teams.
No. We're gonna do combined PUL WL power rankings in our subscriber bonus segment.
Oh,
yeah.
So I don't want to give you too much then here.
No. But okay. I want you to rank the 4 championship weekend teams.
Well, obviously we're going Radiance, Gridlock. I mean,
I don't agree. I don't agree. No, I don't think so. No.
You think the Shadow outplayed the Gridlock?
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay, they obviously lost their first game. Well, they were much closer in the game against Raleigh. They never fell behind by that many goals. They were within a goal late in the game. Like, they broke to make it 16-15. And, credit to Raleigh. Their O-line stood tall, only gave up 1 break in the second half and 3 on the game. But the Shadow were much more competitive throughout the course of that game than New York was in the final. And, it's, it's not apples to orange. It is apples to oranges because you're looking at, the New York game after having played a semifinal, going up against Raleigh in the middle of the day on the turf, which please never again. Let's change that immediately. And so it's hard to say exactly, but just because they made the final, they beat the worst team there.
Yeah, but they dogged them. You get points.
Sure.
That's the thing that happened. We're not just going to discount it. So I think even they lost by the exact same margin. Both teams were in the game in the fourth quarter. So I think that New York, had they managed that fourth quarter better, I think they had just as good a shot at it as DC did. So they're going to get so even in that regard, I'm not sure that I agree that if the DC game felt so much closer. I know that there were points where DC probably grabbed on a little bit, but New York was there in the end of the game with a shot. They just that last possession, their last offensive point was tough to watch them, burn. It's 75 of the 105 seconds that they had left or whatnot. Don't know why they were being so possessive of the disc rather than try to score to potentially force overtime. But New York had their shot, and so to me that seems pretty even with DC at worst. And then they get that bonus points for crushing a strike team that they just overwhelmed a bit.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to argue that, but I do think that DC was the better team overall on the weekend. I know New York has the head-to-head win, but different question playing in DC versus in New York. Overall, I think one of my quibbles, and maybe it shouldn't be a quibble, but Raleigh had the worst of the seasons of these four teams, and yet was not the 4 seed. And that doesn't make sense to me. And so I want to see, it emphasizes for me how much it just matters who shows up when Raleigh gets to, kind of come in where, Cammie Groom gets added to the DC roster 2 weeks before the end of the season. Raleigh brings a real roster and then wins. It kind of feels like it just devalues the regular season a lot, particularly when the way that they did the rankings at championship weekend was not based on your record. How is a 6-0 team that has a win over New York not the 1 seed? I just, to me, that doesn't make sense. I don't know that would have necessarily changed the outcome here, Keith, but I would like to see them have a more clear mechanism for making sure the regular season feels like it counts.
Do you think the Surge thinks it counts? Probably not, right?
No,
they're probably no.
That's even more heinous. That's even more heinous. I mean, they go 5-1.
Weird here.
Super weird.
I mean, part of it is 6 games is just simply not enough information, right?
I understand that.
Especially if teams have varying rosters throughout. And that's a much more difficult problem to solve because it requires more cost to do so. It's a logistical challenge. So it's how do you make a 6-week, or 6 game plus 2 postseason game season? How do you structure that so that you are properly distributing the resonance of those games across? Obviously, you want the postseason games to be more important, so single elimination is a good way to do that. But what do you do with these other 6 games to make it feel like they matter even more?
I mean, changing the way that the structure is, changing the way that you can't have 3 divisions. It doesn't work well. You got to go to 4 divisions or 2. There's a lot of things to do to improve the overall structure so that even if you only play 6 games, it will still work out well. I'd love to see them go to 8 and have a little bit more of a home and away feel with their competition. And maybe you play, every team in your division twice, and then you play, some 2 out of division teams twice or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go about it, but what happened this season just felt like too random, too fickle, totally unfair to the Philadelphia team. And then weird seating. I don't know, just like all ends up feeling a little weird. But at the end of the day, I think Raleigh would have won this tournament no matter who they played. They were just the best team there.
100%. Yeah. None of this is to discredit a Raleigh team that I think would have been the champion in nearly any format based on the way that they played. But still, there definitely feels like there could be improvement here. It's an odd season for the PUL as a whole. Exciting. Like the level of play was pretty solid. Definitely some good things, but the controversy I feel like might mar it a little bit when people look back at this year.
All right, well, we are going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a little HSNI, and we got a couple of other things to get to as well. So stay with us. You're listening to Deep Look.
Welcome back to Deep Look. Charlie, you and I were out in Utah for the High School National Invite, and we're going to talk all about that tournament. But first, a little club talk, sort of. Not really. The rosters for the club teams have started to come out, and Flipside dropped one that I quite enjoyed. So the Flipside graphic was formatted as a menu, and each player's menu price was their jersey number, presumably, and then a little description of what menu item they are. On the breakfast menu. So the Flipside breakfast menu, love it, thematic, it all works. But I tweeted, I was like, I got to get on a team to find out what breakfast item I would be. Charlie, if you were making the roster for Team Multiworld, like what breakfast item am I going to be? I got to know.
Oh, I have to choose what you're going to be?
I feel like you don't get to choose your own breakfast item, right? It's like picking your own nickname.
Oh my gosh. I feel like it's got to be some kind of maybe like Belgian waffle with like syrup and whipped cream or something like that. Like something like on the sweet side of the breakfast department.
Because I'm such a sweet human. No, because
because you're the sweetest guy I know, Keith.
I feel like you're like bacon and eggs protein business. Like let's get it started. Like you love a good like bacon egg breakfast.
I do. My thing I always order is like the lumberjack or whatever the giant breakfast menu item is. Now I can't really choose it for myself, as you say, but that's what I would hope to be on there. I really like the subtle detail. The rookies are all farm fresh eggs from whatever city they're from. Very good.
This is high quality stuff. I mean, last week we had Sub-Zero, I think, come out with their DQ Blizzard menu, and this is like a step up even from that. This is even clearer. So, well, it's very aesthetically appealing because it really does look like a diner menu. It's not like too crazy. It's not trying to do too much. I feel like a lot of the roster releases lately they're just like, how many graphical elements can we jam into this thing? This is just straightforward. It looks like a menu, and the prices being the roster numbers is just, it's perfect. It is a perfect thing. I like the beverages. Coaches available iced. Look, this is great work. I love everything about it. And in general, a shout out to everybody, all the graphic design folks doing the work on all these rosters. It looks good. I hope that this is a trend that continues, and I hope that it portends more high quality content coming out from teams of all stripes. I just
wish that teams would take the same kind of energy into like having a website or jerseys with numbers you can read. Yes. Like, I don't understand. Like somehow it's become the trend to like put a ton of effort into the graphic design of your roster release, which I'm all for that. But there's so many other things that just get left behind.
Also,
what are you gonna do? By the way, this Flipside roster is really good, Keith.
It is good. It's good. By the way, also, if you are a team out there and you're putting out your roster graphic, can you just take one extra second and either reply to it with just a text list or email editor@ltworld.com with just the text? It makes our lives easier. It really does. And if you're going to do the graphic, like include. It really is also helpful to highlight who's new players. It just saves us so much time.
I want to, just looking at this roster, hard to say for me that they're better than last year. Losing Dina is a big blow, Keith, but
Indeed.
they have some nice pickups. It's just becoming kind of like a Southwest U.S. team. There's some Arizona players on here. We see Megan Maxfield joins the roster. Lindsay Doyle joins the roster. I mean, these are players that have really showed out in the Western Ultimate League. No surprise to see Abby Schultz show up here. And then, they have lots of the stalwart players that we know from this team. Kayla Helton, Caitlin Weaver, Krista Pajunas. I think this is a quarters team, Keith, and they might knock on the door of semis.
Blair Messner.
Yes.
It's time to see the translation across. Yeah, I think this is a quarters team with a chance to threaten, maybe at the area of where we highlighted like some Sixers teams or Scandal. I think that's probably where there's like not a lock for semifinals, not a like, oh, this is a big favorite to make semifinals, but they're going to be in that conversation right after those teams, I would say. I think that's
right.
Also, right. What did Alicia Stown do to become an unholy donut?
I don't know.
I'm left wondering, which maybe is the idea. You're like, I'm curious now.
You got to think on that a little bit. All right. High School National Invite took place this past weekend in Salt Lake City. And 2 repeat champions. How about that? The Lone Peak boys and the South Eugene gender diverse team winning in the girls division. Take it down. And man, oh man, this is quickly become one of my favorite events of the year. It's just so much fun. Everybody's in such a great mood. The weather was incredible this year. It could not have been any better.
Ultimate tournament with good weather. I liked it. I wasn't even sure it could happen.
Oh my gosh. And just, the view of the mountains from the fields. This field complex, Keith, is going to start hosting more tournaments. I feel like confident in that. It is very nice. And I mean, there's a lot to get to from the team side and just the overall tournament experience side, but really impressive stuff from these teams, both of which, by the way, Lone Peak and South Eugene, graduated a lot of really important and key pieces. So for them to come back and win again, they were not the favorites in either division. And it really speaks to the depth and quality of the programs that they're building.
100%. It's funny because there definitely are parallels like that. I think that the best players on this year's teams for both the Lone Peak boys division team and the South Eugene girls division team, I don't know if they're quite at the caliber of what we saw last year from the star duos at the top of those teams, let alone just one individual player. But they still dominated. I mean, it was mostly them running roughshod over their competition. There were a couple of moments where they were challenged, but not very many. Those were fleeting, it turned out. So really impressive stuff from both of these programs. And I think there's a lot to be proud of. That sustaining it for multiple years is just a whole different beast than just having a good team for a year.
Yeah. And, it will be a big test for them to try to do it again next year. This Lone Peak team, what a performance from Mitchell Burt, particularly in the final where he had 5 goals and 2 assists. Sam Pugh, I thought, was tremendous defensively the whole weekend. But they got contributions from guys up and down the roster, including names that you haven't heard before. And I don't necessarily know, Keith, if we're looking at any like future club superstars on this team, but the high ceiling, or I should say the high floor of players really contributed to their success. And it's something you see very similarly at BYU. I don't think that's any kind of coincidence, where the 20th guy on the roster has really good inside forehands. And that's the same kind of deal with Lone Peak. It's hard to take them out of what they're trying to do because they have high competence up and down the roster.
We got emailed a media guide for this Lone Peak boys team that was incredibly in-depth and informative about the team. I've honestly never seen anything like it. I don't think in Ultimate, period. It was shocking to me how many of these players, it was like, how many years have you been playing? 8, 10. Like these are Seattle, Raleigh triangle numbers, these Boston numbers. You know what I mean? We've been playing since basically we were old enough to compete in organized sports numbers. It was wild, but you could see it on the field. I mean, these look like players who've been playing not only Ultimate, but playing a similar style of Ultimate their whole careers. And those are things that I think about when I see, young Seattle stars or increasingly more the Carolina players who have a similar kind of, okay, we've been steeped in the same style of play. We all play this way. There's kind of a community, not necessarily agreement, but we've all kind of been built around the same types of fundamentals and systems and values on the field. And that to me looks like it plays out for this Lone Peak team, and is part of what has made them so successful, is that they are on the same page. Like there's a clear identity and style to how they play.
Yeah. And, over on the South Eugene side, Ollie Bunsen was certainly the player that drove the team. Great performances as well from Mara Hindri-Glasinovic. She was fantastic. In the final, she had 3 goals, 2 assists, and 2 blocks. Fluffy Jones. But again, similar story where they got contributions from a lot of different players. They played, you could feel the influence of Lou Burris on this team. He's only an assistant coach, but I mean, they play in that kind of aggressive style where they are happy to turn it over, go down, play defense, get it back, and score. And it's not the cleanest Ultimate you've ever watched. It's not some kind of perfect crystal, pure O-line, but man, is it effective. They ran teams over with just the relentless attack and some big throwing and strong deep cutting.
Yeah, and I think one of the best examples of that is the way that Bunsen would activate play. Like there'd be a turnover and they would pick it up and just run it to the spot. Running it back to the field or running it to the front of the end zone, and then quickly get like a give and go, which put them into power position and they could throw a big huck. Like that was how the offense could operate. We saw the same thing last year with Ezra Waybright at the helm. And it's unclear to me whether that's like Lou's direct influence. He's just listed as an assistant coach. Rochelle Deppner has been the head of the program. Or if it's more of a wider, like I have influenced the style of play in this area.
Coaching tree.
Right. And, 2 of Lou's kids have played on the team. Helen, they were playing quite well in this tournament. I think they're maybe the next kind of star player coming up on this team, as they are set to lose some of the big names from this year's group. But yeah, they look deep. They also had a clear identity, a clear game plan. But they were more athletic, better deep throwing, and a stronger defensive team, I think, than pretty much anybody else that we saw.
They defeated Roosevelt in the final 15-8, and a really tough finish to the tournament for a Roosevelt team that came in as the number 1 seed, had basically dominated throughout competition up in the Washington State the entire year. Have the best player on paper at the tournament in Chloe Hakimi, just made the U24 roster. And Keith, they just didn't play very well in the final. I mean, how many drops did they have? They must have had 5 to 10 drops. And drops on like wide open catches, like resets, deep hucks in the end zone, every type of drop that they could come up with aside from dropping the pole, they had in the bag. And it definitely a situation where they have to feel like they played their worst game at the most important time. And that's really frustrating for young players. And that clearly got in their heads over the course of the game. Like they were visibly shaken by their mistakes as the game went on. And that made it really tough for them to recover. Prior to that, up until the semifinal, they'd really had a great run. And even in the semifinal, they got a strong push from Nathan Hale, but they were able to hold them off. But once it came to the final, they just could not keep up. And once you're behind, trying to play from behind against a team like South Eugene, who's already so good, it just took away all the wind out of their sails. And on the boys' side, that was Eastside Prep the top seed, making the final, playing against Lone Peak. They played a much tighter game. It was 15-12 Lone Peak. Eastside Prep had chances. They had chances to get the game back to within one, and just couldn't quite come up with the key break when they needed it. But I got to say, Axel Olsen, their junior center handler, what a talent. I don't think we've seen a better throwing prospect coming up in high school in a long time. We've seen better athletes, maybe. We've seen better, cutters, overall all-around players, sure. But from a raw throwing skill perspective, Axel Olsen was unbelievable. I mean, he unlocks the field. He had 7 assists and 2 goals in the final, often looking for Philip Isev downfield. And that was a deadly duo. But credit to Lone Peak. They kind of put the clamps a little bit on the deep space and forced a lot of turnovers from Olsen. But both those guys are coming back next year, Keith. I think Eastside Prep's going to be a top level team once again in 2024.
I am like kind of rifling through my mental Rolodex here, trying to think if I can think of a high school thrower who is as good as Axel Olsen is in the boys division. No, I've seen some great high school players, Charlie, and I really am not sure if I have. I mean, if you went outside the boys division, like, maybe you talk like we're talking like Cardenas twin level thrower at this age. Like how this is wild.
Yeah, I mean, and it's unsurprising. I think we mentioned this in the preview. He's a very good disc golfer. He's over 1,000 rated disc golfer. Folks, play disc golf if you want to become a better ultimate thrower. Some will argue otherwise, but they're wrong.
How do you know it's not the other way around right now for him?
Just trust me. Learning how to throw is learning how to throw. But yeah, I think, we'll see how he develops physically at the higher levels. But from a straight up, can you throw a flat-footed 80-yard forehand? The answer is very much yes. And he will automatically start on the offense for wherever he goes to college.
Which is remarkable. I mean, I know in the men's division at D1, Michael Glass just won Rookie of the Year, and he could credibly probably be said to be like a primary thrower for that Oregon team. But this is fairly rare to see a ready-made elite handler who can come in their rookie year for any team in the country. It's just even the good rookies that we see are often, they have some of this skill, but they have more athleticism to work with. And Olsen's ability as a thrower is pretty much unmatched at the high school level. Still got another year too, like you mentioned.
What else stands out to you from the tournament, Keith?
Well, of course, that as usual, the talent level just gets better and better every year. I mean, just teams were good. Players were really good. And that's one of the most fun things. I mentioned it before the tournament, just getting to see and getting to know some of these young players and their games is a lot of fun. The difference, it's funny because you also have this thing that happens where the difference between the youngest players and the oldest players in the tournament is a lot more visible and pronounced than what you see at like college, and maybe even to some degree in club, like with the rare exception that when you get like a high school player in club. But you have people who are 15, 16 and haven't hit their growth spurts yet, and they're running around with 18-year-olds, and it makes for a fun environment. There was a lot of passionate parents and fans on the sidelines of pretty much every team, which also added to the air of excitement. So it was a fun tournament. A lot of star players making big plays, whether it was folks from Seattle like Cedar Hines and Rowan Limp, or whether it was folks from other parts of the country who I didn't know before. Tamir Hill Marshall was awesome from Jackson Reed. Kylia McRoy, another Seattle player who I wasn't familiar with. I know Seattle Academy didn't have a great weekend, but I was really impressed walking away from her. Eve Masick, who's again had another awesome tournament for Four Rivers. She was great last year, but maybe in a smaller role. But I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody get as many blocks in a single game as I watched her get playing deep in their zone. I mean, just like literal no-fly zone. Like if you throw it anywhere within 30 yards, I'm getting it. It was remarkable. So a lot of fun to get to know these players.
I'm hyped for Stella Onder to get to BYU and play in college. That BYU team is going to be real nice next year. Onder was a standout at YCC last year. Awesome this weekend. Such a tough grinder of a player. A little do it all and super impressive.
Perfect fit for BYU too. I mean, that is them to a T, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice weekend overall for the Utah teams. How many ended up in semis? 3? The Lone Peak girls.
Yeah, Lone Peak and Green Canyon boys, and then Green Canyon girls. And Lone Peak girls were close. I mean, they had the lead on Hale in quarters, and Hale rattled off like 3 straight.
All Western teams in the girls semis. 2 teams from Washington, Roosevelt and Nathan Hale, and then Oregon for South Eugene and Utah for Green Canyon. On the boys' side, Utah for 2 of the teams, and then Oregon for South Eugene and Washington for Eastside Prep. So still seeing the strongest sides coming from that western side of the U.S., but lots of quarters teams from all around the country. Jackson Reed from D.C., Jordan from North Carolina, Edina from Minnesota. And so nice diversity of skill around the country. And I don't think any team at the tournament overall felt like they truly did not belong. And that makes it a lot of fun.
I mean, I pointed out that, while in the girls division, we're so used to Seattle dominating, and, obviously they put 2 teams into semifinals and a team into the final, but they also had 3 of the bottom 4 finishers of the tournament, 3 teams that went 0-3 in pool play. So, it's not like Seattle is invincible. These are good teams. Like, I watched them play. They know how to play. It's not like the Seattle scene is totally invincible, and we didn't really have any of the Carolina teams in the girls' side that, people might think of, or we had a little representation from like Massachusetts and whatnot, but New Jersey. But, when you think of the high-powered women's communities that were sending teams, like there wasn't much beyond Seattle and Oregon. So to see those Seattle teams, some of them finish near the bottom, I think is a good sign for their competition level that other communities are able to bring when they put all their talent together.
It reminds me that I think we're going to make a change for next year for the way that teams qualify for this tournament. Of course, there are qualifying tournaments now that you can win in order to earn a bid directly. We'll see about, we'll be bringing those back. Maybe we'll be adding a tournament or 2 to that as well. But I think we're also going to put a cap, at least in the boys division, on the number of teams from one state that can qualify. There's a balance. You want to find a balance between, kind of diversity of teams from around the country, as well as having the top teams there. Some states deserve multiple teams. Washington, Utah, both proved that for sure. And so, but the thing is, do we need to have, I think there were 5 Washington boys teams this year. I think that's too many. Not that they didn't belong, but, there are spots that could be going to other teams from other areas in the country that could be just as competitive, if not more. You look at Edina, a quarters team. St. Louis Park was a team that beat them during the season, came very close to beating them in the state championship game. I'm sure they would have been competitive, for instance. The girls division, this is the first year we've had 16 teams. So I don't think we're quite at the point where we're going to say, hey, we shouldn't have as many Washington teams. The Washington teams are really good. And so, we'll see on that front, but certainly looking to continue to improve the overall mix of teams at the tournament, and so much fun. Already looking forward to next year.
You hear any rumblings about colleges that maybe getting strong classes from stuff you saw at the tournament?
Well, I haven't sifted through the lists, but Colorado seems to be doing really nicely with recruiting on both sides. I've heard some Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon's another one that jumps out to me.
What else, Keith?
Yeah, Oregon going to continue to get, especially on the girl side, the women's division squad is going to get stacked. They're picking up some of these South Eugene players, and obviously they had a great rookie class already. So get ready for Fugue. Vermont keeps coming up. I feel like in the women's division, I keep coming across players interested in going there or who are already going there. Vermont, and probably some in the boys division as well. Vermont is pumping up. I mean, I don't know if it's just like people are attracted to the same schools or if people are networking, or what, but yeah, those Oregon, Vermont, Colorado, those are all teams whose names came up multiple times, I'd say, across different prospects.
All right. Well, a great tournament overall. Keith, what'd you think of this? The atmosphere we had the finals in the evening. It was pretty nice.
Sure, definitely a better environment than some of the other ones that we've talked about. Playing in the hot sun, taking heat timeouts and whatnot on turf. The setup for us was a soccer field, and there were bleachers on one side outside of a fence. So that was kind of our setup, which was close to what we had talked about previously. A little bit closer atmosphere than like a stadium setting where there's the track and you're then raised up off the ground too. So you're a lot further away. It feels like than what we got here. I thought that the fans were really into it. I thought the players really enjoyed engaging with the fans, like having the cheering happening and signs and the flags and the big sidelines. I thought that helped make for a fun atmosphere, especially down the pipe with semis and finals.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on HSNI 2023. Keith, you want to shout out? Let's get your top 2 prospects right now in high school ultimate from what you saw this weekend, of course.
Prospects meaning they're going to college now, or they're just the best?
No, just the top prospects who will be going to who will be college age in the next, let's say, 3 seasons. Got you.
3 seasons, does that get me in Hakimi range? She's a sophomore. I mean, it's hard not to say Chloe Hakimi still in the girls division. I mean, just remarkably, it looks like an elite club player right now and is 16. It's definitely remarkable.
She threw a backhand around break at one point that like everybody who was in the production booth was like, "Oh my God."
Well, what's funny is
like pro level break.
Prior to that break throw, she had thrown that fake like maybe 3 or 4 times, and 2 of those times people dove on the ground trying to stop it. Like I think the other schools knew like, don't let her get to this backhand because it's so nasty. And then she snapped it off, and the crowd's like, "Oh my, people aren't throwing that. Nobody else is throwing that." To me, the other individual in the boys division that stood out, I probably still would say Tobias Brooks. Cedar Hines is right there. But Tobias Brooks is just total package. Great player. The floor is just so high with a player with his combination of skill and athleticism.
Is he going to Chapel Hill?
No, I think he's going to Colorado, my friend.
Oh, that's right. Oh, wow. Wow. That's a huge pickup. I mean, he's a special player. He could do like whatever you need. Play D-line and get you buckets after the turn. He could start on your offense. He could be a thrower or a cutter. Very, very good all-around player. Hines was carrying his team though.
He's fiery. He plays with a lot of passion. I don't know what his plans are as far as post high school. Let's see if I have that information. Well, he's still 17, so he might have another year. He's a junior, so he has another year. But he's on sockeye right now, so we're already going to start to see what he's putting together. That's wild. He's a junior too. Some of the best players in high school are coming back next year.
A lot of good players coming back next season. Should be an up year for sure for the division. All right. That is going to do it for today's show. Make sure you join us in our subscriber bonus segment out the back, where we are going to not only do our combined PULWL power rankings, postseason power rankings. But we are going to, what's the other thing we're going to do, Keith? I lost the list.
Are we still talking college awards, or you just want? We could just do PULWL if you want.
Oh no, we have an email from Bob Spatz.
Oh yes,
that we need to get to.
We said we were going to forget this time.
We've let this get away, but we want to get to it. It's about modifying college nationals to address some of the competitiveness issues in pool play, where you have imbalanced competition and teams being able to rest their rosters because they've already won the pool. So we'll take a look at Bob's ideas. That is going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. We'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.